The first one showed up in the second winter. I didn't hear it come in. The perimeter sensors on the Havern relay post hadn't logged a contact in 11 months, and I'd stopped trusting them around the time the third calibration module shorted out, and command told me the replacement was on the next supply rotation, which came every 4 months if the lane was clear and never if it wasn't. What I heard instead was a sound like wet rope being dragged across the deck plating, and when I looked up from the relay board, there was a Vorrkai standing in the open doorway, 6 legs tracking mud across my floor, bioluminescent stripe along its throat pooling a slow, deep amber. I'd read the species file, Class IV predator designation, pack hunters, jaws that could close on a standard pressure door and bend it. The file said do not approach, do not make eye contact, do not attempt to communicate. The file was written by people who had never been alone at a frontier relay post for 14 months with a broken perimeter grid and 1 working heat coil. I said, "You're letting the cold in." It looked at me for a long moment. Then it walked to the corner beside the heat coil, turned twice, and lay down. That was Hess. That's what I started calling him, anyway, the silver-furred one with the notched left ear and the way of looking at you that suggested it had already considered 3 different ways to end the conversation and found them all boring. He was there when I woke up the next morning. He was there the morning after that. On the 4th day, he brought in a second one, smaller, younger, with a stripe that flickered pale blue instead of amber, and the 2 of them occupied the corner like they'd paid a deposit. By spring, there were 7 adults and 2 young ones, and I had stopped trying to file a report about it because I'd seen what happened to frontier posts flagged for Class IV contact. They sent a containment team. The post got locked down for 6 weeks, and the relay service went dark for a sector that had 17 mining operations depending on my signal bounce. I told myself it was a resource allocation decision. It mostly was. The young ones were the size of large dogs. They smelled like wet slate and something faintly electrical, and they had a habit of sleeping across whatever part of me was horizontal at any given moment. My boots if I was at the terminal, my legs if I was on the bunk, once memorably across my face when I fell asleep on the floor patching a conduit. The adults maintained a loose perimeter around the post through the night. I didn't ask them to. They didn't ask me whether I wanted it. It was just the arrangement we arrived at, the way 2 people sharing a small space eventually sort out who takes which side of the room. I learned what bothered them. Loud pressure vents. The oldest female would pace and vocalize until I cycled the vent manually. The smell of the chemical sealant I used on the antenna joints. Hess would press his nose against my knee and stay there, immovable, until I aired the space out. What I could not figure out for nearly a year was what I'd done to earn any of it. I was a middle-aged relay technician with a worn work jacket and a face nobody remembered. I had not performed any feat. I had not demonstrated any exceptional quality. I had opened a door and said 4 words to something that could have walked through me without slowing down, and apparently that was enough. The 2 young ones, I called Pip and the other one Pip2, because they were functionally indistinguishable until Pip2 lost half an ear in what I can only assume was a serious disagreement with a piece of local wildlife. After that it was easy. Pip2 had opinions about everything, the scheduling of my meals, the order in which I checked the relay nodes, the specific chair I used at the terminal. If I deviated from a pattern she decided was correct, she would sit directly between me and whatever I was trying to do and stare at me until I acknowledged the problem. I started keeping a log of her objections. It was the most detailed behavioral record I'd produced in 3 years, and I was the only one who would ever read it. The second winter passed. A third came and went. I put in the same supply requests and got the same partial fulfillments. The relay logs showed clean signal bounce, no gaps, 17 mining operations running on schedule. I kept the post. The Vorrkai kept the post with me. Then Breck Ossian arrived. He came in on a Colonial Logistics cutter, unannounced, which was how I knew it was bad. Announced visits gave the recipient time to file objections. He was a trim man in a pressed gray uniform, carrying a datapad with the kind of scroll length that meant either a contract termination or a very serious audit, and he stepped off the cutter ramp looking at his screen and not at his surroundings, which told me everything I needed to know about how he'd been briefed. I met him at the bottom of the ramp. The Vorrkai were in the tree line. They'd gone there when the cutter's engines broke the horizon, not out of fear, I'd come to understand, but out of something more like courtesy. They gave me space to deal with human business. They were watching, though. The throat stripes were visible between the trunks, amber and blue and one pale green that was the eldest female's particular color. "Keeper calls," Ossian said, still reading the pad. "Havern Relay Post. I'm Inspector Ossian, Colonial Logistics Review. I'm here to discuss post decommission and your reassignment to Sector Hub 7. "There's coffee inside," I said. He looked up for the first time. "This won't take long. The post's relay function is being absorbed into the new automated array at Juncture 19. Your position is being retired. We appreciate your service." He swiped the pad. "I also need to document the Class IV contact report that came up in your file review. There's a notation that a Vorrkai pack may be using the post vicinity as a denning ground. We'll need to coordinate a containment and removal team." "They're not in the vicinity," I said. "They're in the tree line right now." He looked at the trees. The throat stripes pulsed quietly in the shadow. To his credit, he didn't run. He went very still, the way people go still when they're doing rapid arithmetic on a problem they didn't expect to be doing arithmetic on. And then he said, with admirable steadiness, "Keeper calls. A Class IV pack of that size represents a serious risk to personnel. Standard protocol requires immediate." "They'll leave when I leave," I said. "That's not how Class IV contact protocol works." "I know, I've read the file." I put my hands in my jacket pockets, "but that's how this particular situation works." He filed for a containment team. They arrived 2 days later. 4 specialists in full contact-traded gear with a portable suppression array that probably cost more than the relay post had generated in revenue across its entire operational life. They came down the ramp in a tight cluster and spread into standard approach formation, and the Vorrkai watched from the tree line while I stood by the post door and drank my coffee. The team leader, a woman named Versh, who had the look of someone who'd done this work for a long time and had a precise calibration of when it was going to go wrong, stopped about 40 meters out and assessed the situation. 7 adults had stepped to the tree line edge, not charging, not vocalizing, standing in a loose arc, throat stripes steady, watching her team the way you watch something you've already measured and found uninteresting. "Keeper calls," she called across the yard. "Can you confirm the pack size?" 7 adults, 2 juvenile. The adults are Vorrkai standard, pack bonded, not territorial in the aggressive sense. They're stationed here. I finished my coffee. "Hess is the one in front with the notched ear. He's the alpha. Don't move toward him directly." Versh studied Hess. Hess studied Versh. His stripe was a slow, deep amber, calm, I'd learned. The color he went when he'd already decided something and was waiting for the world to catch up. She looked back at her team, then at me. "What happens if we proceed with approach?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "We've never tried it." She turned to Ossian, who had been standing at a careful distance behind the team. "Inspector, I'm logging a pack formation threat assessment hold. I'm not advancing a team into a bonded Vorrkai formation of this size without behavioral baseline data and an established risk protocol. That's going to take," she checked something on her wrist unit, "approximately 3 to 4 weeks to establish through the standard review process." Ossian's expression did something complicated. "This post is scheduled for decommission." "Yes, sir, and I'd like to still have a team at the end of it." He filed to have me removed by administrative order. That was within his authority. I received the notification at the terminal that evening, read it, and then sat for a while looking at the relay board while Pip2 pushed her head under my arm and Hess lay across the doorway with his legs extended. The rest of the adults were positioned in their usual configuration around the perimeter, and the eldest female was doing the thing she did some evenings, standing at the northeast corner looking at the stars with an attention that always seemed too focused to be accidental, as though she was tracking something specific. I filed a formal objection through the Colonial Logistics review portal. I wrote it carefully, 3 years of relay logs showing uninterrupted service, the 17 operations that ran on my signal bounce, the cost of the transition gap while the automated array came online, and a section I wrote last, which was a behavioral summary of a scifi Vorrkai pack that had chosen to station itself at a frontier relay post and maintain a voluntary perimeter around it for 31 months without a single logged incident of aggression toward any human personnel. I filed it under my keeper code at 2200 hours. Then I went asleep because the relay board was cycling clean and there was nothing more I could do before morning. What I didn't know until the review board opened the file, what Asian told me later with an expression I can only describe as personally offended, was that the filing log showed my objection submitted at 2200 and then showed 8 additional access confirmations from 2200 to 400, all under my code, all from the post terminal. The review board's investigator came out personally because an anomalous access log on an active administrative dispute required physical verification. She arrived to find the terminal operational, the log clean, and seated in a loose formation around the chair I used for terminal work, 6 adult Vorrkai in a patient arc. Pip was asleep across the keyboard. Hess was sitting beside the chair with his stripe poolsing amber, slow and steady, the way it always looked when he decided something and was waiting for the world to catch up. The investigator, her name was Sendalvar, and she sent me a personal note about it afterward, stood in the doorway for what she described in her report as an indeterminate period, before locating me at the antenna array doing a calibration check. "Keeper calls," she said. "Can you explain the access log?" "No," I said, "but they haven't broken anything." She looked back through the doorway at the pack. Pip hadn't woken up. The keyboard was undamaged. The log was, by every technical measure, valid. Her report recommended a 90-day behavioral study of the pack before any decommission or removal action was taken, on the grounds that a scifi Vorrkai pack demonstrating facility integration at this level of complexity represented a data asset of significant scientific value. Asian objected. The Scientific Bureau counterfiled. Colonial Logistics, facing the prospect of an interdepartmental dispute over a relay post they'd already written off, quietly shelved the decommission order pending review. That was 7 months ago. I'm still here. The automated array at Juncture 19 came online late, which is how these things usually go, and during the transition gap, my relay bounce covered 4 additional mining operations that had been running dark for 6 weeks. Asian has not returned. Versh sends me the occasional message, a professional curiosity, she says, though her questions are specific enough that I suspect she's writing something. Sendalvar visited once more, stayed 3 days, and on the last evening sat with me outside, while the eldest female watched the stars and Pip2 cataloged some objection she had with the position of a supply crate that had been in the same position for 2 years. "Do you know why they chose this post?" Dalvar asked. I thought about it. "I think they chose the person," I said. "The post just came with me." She wrote that down. I don't know what she did with it. What I know is this. The relay board cycles clean. The Vorrkai keep the perimeter. Pip still sleeps across my boots, and Pip2 still has opinions about the chair. Hess lies in the doorway some evenings with his stripe burning slow amber, while the cold comes in off the frontier dark, and I have stopped trying to explain to him that he is a scifi threat who is not supposed to be here, because he was here before I understood what here meant, and I have the strong impression that if I left, he would simply follow, and the relay post would have to sort itself out. I don't have a plan for that. I'm not sure I need one. The pack is here, I'm here. The signal bounces clean. That's the arrangement we arrived at. I don't think either of us is planning to change it.